Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Scott. I am the principal at Christel House, Jamaica. Christel House, Jamaica is one of 9 Christel House schools located in 5 countries across the world. We're a non-profit, no-fee institution who really aims to break the barriers to education by providing for students tuition, transportation, breakfast, uniforms, all that they need for effective schooling. So the mission of Christel House is embedded in our mission statement, which says Christel House prepares graduates to achieve upward economic mobility, demonstrate good citizenship, and become empowered to identify and realize their goals, dreams, and human potential. Let me use this opportunity to welcome you all today to our webinar. So our webinar title, Leading for Impact, Effective School Leadership in High Poverty Context. And it is a part of the Learning Planet Festival, which is currently on, the global celebration on education and learning that is supported by UNESCO. So our company, Christel House, uses the approach to prioritize equity, resilience, and leadership to transform education in high poverty areas. So joining me this morning on our panel will be other members of our Christel House network, and we also have panelists who are from other areas, to give us a diverse perspective on this topic. So I want you, at some point, we're going to be introducing all our panelists, and they'll be sharing with us who they are, where they're from, and how they will represent us in this discussion this morning. We want it to be a very interactive session, as well as we're going to be inviting you at this time to participate in our audience poll. So this will be shared with us for us to participate. It is, there are no incorrect answers for this. It's just really to gauge your perspective and get a sense and set the tone for our discussions. So the first question in our poll is, what do you think is the most significant barrier to student success in high poverty schools? So what we'll do, I'll just give you a few seconds just to give your response to this. So we have as options, is it a lack of funding and resources? Is it teacher burnout and turnover? Is it insufficient community engagement? Or do you think it's something else? So at this point in time, you can just start inserting your answers. As we think about that, I just want to share with us from research, educational researcher Isidore would have shared that studies of risk and resilience in children have shown that family income correlates significantly with children's academic success. Just to pick our brains a little bit about what the research says about high poverty context. See the responses going in. Thank you so much. I'm going to be moving shortly now into our second question. So question number 2. Which leadership trait do you believe is most crucial for success in high poverty educational contexts? Which leadership trait do you believe is most crucial for success in high poverty educational context? And our responses would be, is it empathy, resilience, strategic thinking, or collaboration? So I'll just await your responses to that. So if there's anyone just joining in, we're currently conducting an audience poll, and we would just love for you to share your responses to the questions that we're posing. And these questions are helping to set for us a tone for where our discussion will be taking us today. Third question in the poll: what role do you think schools should prioritize to create equity in high poverty areas? What role do you think schools should prioritize to create equity in high poverty areas? Should we prioritize academic support programs, mental health and well-being services, family and community engagement, or professional development for teachers? And our final poll question: what is the most pressing challenges in engaging parents and communities in high poverty school context? What is the most pressing challenge in engaging parents and communities in high poverty school context? Is it a lack of trust or communication? Is it time and resource constraints for families? Is it cultural or language barriers? Or is it a misalignment of goals? We will appreciate your responses for this, as we will be using this to guide our discussion. And also as we get to the end of this webinar, where we'll be able to share our opinions. So please remember, feel free to provide whatever response you think, as this is not about right or wrong answers. It's just a learning experience for all of us. During our panel discussion, we're also going to be encouraging you to post questions. You can submit your questions to the chat, and our team will be monitoring these questions. So throughout, we can also help and have our panelists provide responses as you listen to what we have to share, and also chime in and give your responses based on your particular context. Final call for the polls. Just gonna give it another few seconds and then we wrap up. And we're gonna be moving straight into an introduction of our panelists. So just giving a few seconds for us to close out our poll so we can now move to hearing from our panelists, or for them to just share with us who they are, what roles they play as educational leaders in the specific areas of the world in which they fall, and how we're going to be contributing together to get this panel discussion about leading for impact, effective school leadership in high poverty context. Now, I hope you're excited as I am to start hearing from our panelists. And we're going to now move straight into meeting our incredible panelists. Each individual will introduce themselves and just share with us how their work connects to leading in the high poverty context. We have 5 panelists with us, and we will start off with Sitara.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jason. Hi, everybody. We are really excited to be a part of this panel discussion. My name is Sitara Chandran, and I am the head of education strategy and learning at Christel House, India. So in my role, I work closely with the head of academics and school leaders across 2 of our India schools. Some of the things I work on is holistic learning initiatives for our students, streamlining processes and structures, teacher and leader development, as well as school culture. And the reason that I do the work that I do is because I believe that education has the power to break the cycles of poverty. I believe that all students are brilliant, including ours, and we just need to level the playing field for them. And I also believe that educators in this context need to be taken care of, and Christel House believes in that as well. So that's why I'm here, and excited to see how this panel unfolds.
Thank you so much, Sitara, and we're glad to have you, and we look forward to what you'll have to share. We'll move to Afua.
Hi, everyone. My name is Afua Dogbatsey, joining from Accra, Ghana, and I'm head of partnerships at Rising Academies here in Ghana. Rising works with more than 900 schools, which comprises our own network of great value private schools, as well as public schools across 4 African countries. In my role, I get to support 85 public school leaders in the basic education space to improve their school management practices, as well as learning outcomes in their schools. And this work is primarily based in the northern part of Ghana, which has very high levels of poverty. And so I'm excited to be a part of this panel to share insights from my work. Thank you. I look forward to learning from the other panelists as well as those who have joined. Thank you.
Thank you, Afua. Ronald.
Hi, everyone. I am Ronald Fortune. I currently serve as the Chief Academic Officer at Christel House, South Africa, where I oversee our programs and services division, including the high school, the junior school, social services, and college and careers departments. My journey in education has taken me across a range of school environments, from serving middle-class families to those deeply entrenched in poverty. But it was in schools of poverty where I truly found my purpose, and that's where Christel House found me. So in 2005, I joined Christel House, and I've been here at Christel House since then, 20 years, can you believe it? Today, I come here to discuss, as a practitioner, a lifelong learner, and eager to share my experiences and teaching and leadership strategies that have worked in high poverty schools, and to learn from all of you how to continue this vital work.
Thank you, Ronald. We look forward to what you have to share with your vast experience. Harry.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. My name's Harry LaVercombe. I am here as a CNC, the College and Careers Manager at Christel House, Mexico. I've been in Mexico for 10 years now. I'm from the United States, Minnesota specifically. The College and Career Program is a really exciting one at Christel House. I worked from K through 12 running a program that helps students with career orientation, with identifying what it is they're interested in, from a broad selection of careers, and then kind of learning what are the soft skills and needs they have to get to that point. And then really, what does it look like as far as education, as far as job skills and everything. And then the really fun part, I get to work with all our alumni. Christel House works with alumni for 5 years after graduation. So that's the program I get to manage, and it's a really exciting program. Besides me loving what I do, I'm here at Christel House because I simply think that everyone deserves a good education, and it's something that, despite I think us all agreeing about that, it's where our most vulnerable students kind of fall behind a lot. So I do this because I think these students deserve it. That's as far as it goes.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you. And finally, our 5th panelist, Waahida.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Waahida. I am originally from the United States of America. I'm from Kentucky, and I am living in South Africa. I have been in South Africa for 14 years now. And my role is the co-founder and head of school at Kgololo Academy, which is a private school serving one of the most economically disadvantaged communities, urban communities in South Africa. The reason why my husband, who was from South Africa, and specifically the Alexandra Township, the reason why we started the school is because one of the things that we both noticed is that people who were from communities like Alex, who quote unquote made it, it seemed like they made it in spite of the education that they received and not because of it. And so we really wanted to create a school where we would provide children from the Alexandra Township with access to a world-class education at an accessible cost. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Waahida. So as we are about to get into our panel discussion itself, which are guided by specific questions, I think each member of our panel would have expressed in why they do their job, who they're actually serving. And it goes in line with our title this morning. So going back to the topic that we have our webinar for, which is Leading for Impact, Effective School Leadership in High Poverty Context. We're dealing with our learners or students in the context, within the context of poverty. And as Eric Jensen in his book, Teaching with Poverty in Mind would have shared, a childhood spent in poverty often sets the stage for a lifetime of setbacks. Secure attachments and stable environments, so vitally important to the social and emotional development of young children, are often denied to our neediest kids. So we this morning are enriched with the experiences of a set of panelists who are trying to move away from this within their own context, within their own spaces, within their own institutions, are providing this type of situation where those who are most in need get the opportunity to actually live a life where they can be successful and realize their dreams and their full potential. So this morning, our first question to our panelists will be, what are the most significant challenges leaders face in high poverty context in particular? What are the most significant challenges leaders face in high poverty context in particular? I'm going to be inviting Sitara to start us off, and also I'm going to invite all who are on, if you have questions to pose, if you have an opinion about the question, kindly do so in the chat and we'll manage that. Over to you, Sitara.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. I'm sure the other panelists have things to add, so I'll keep my answer short. I think a lot of our challenges as leaders stem from the challenges that our students face. And given that our students come from high poverty contexts, they have a lot of adverse childhood experiences, which is what you were mentioning as well. And because of those adverse childhood experiences, they have a lot of stress and trauma. And because of that stress and trauma, it affects their behavior. It also affects their learning. So managing these two critical aspects is something I think that all leaders and teachers in this context definitely face. Now, when students have that, what also happens is the educators have to be equally skilled to be able to deal with that and give our children the best. So finding the right teachers and educators, skill building them, and also making sure they have the motivation and the drive to continue on this is something else that we face as a challenge. Additionally, I would say that, and I think some of the other panelists touched upon this as well, and I see that in the question as well, because our parents probably do not have the bandwidth and the time to spend with our students. There is a lot of lack of parental engagement and support. So school becomes a primary place for our students. But when they go out and then they are exposed to like physical violence, alcoholism, and so many other factors, that becomes their reality again. It wipes out a lot of what we are trying to do. Finally, even in terms of the community influences, I think all of this puts together really kind of influences the drive and motivation that our students have. So while we have the vision that they can really achieve a different life, they might not believe that themselves. So I would say these are some of the top challenges, and I let the other people add in as well.
Thank you so much, Sitara. And at this point, I'll just ask Waahida to chime in on this question.
Thanks, Jason. So I agree with what Sitara mentioned in terms of finding teachers. That's one of the challenges that we experienced early on. We work in a high poverty setting, and sometimes teachers don't want to work in those environments. And so that's one of the challenges that we've had. One of the ways that we've overcome that challenge is by being ultra transparent when we're in the recruitment process of letting people know our context, letting people know the challenges that we face. I think before we used to kind of shy away from those challenges and only focus on the glamorous parts. And so now we're super transparent with our teachers when we're recruiting them, letting them know that you're going to make an incredible difference. You're going to be coached, you're going to be developed, but you're not necessarily going to make the same amount that you would make in a government school or in a private school that's in an area that's not high poverty. So that's one of the challenges that we faced, but we're slowly overcoming that challenge. This year, for the first time in our 11-year history, all of our teachers are returners. So we didn't have to actually hire any new staff this year. And I think it's because we've been very transparent and really lifted the veil on what it takes to work in a high poverty setting. Another challenge that we face is building trust amongst our parents. I found that our parents often come to us with a trust deficit. And so we've realized that we have to really work hard to overcome that and earn their trust. And one of the ways that we've done that with our parents is by being transparent as well. I think that this generation requires more transparency than past generations. And so just really lifting the veil, sharing the budget with parents, sharing the challenges with parents, and really inviting them, to sharing the problems and inviting them to also support you in handling those challenges. I think that that's really been beneficial to us. We still have a lot of room to grow, but I feel that we've made progress in building trust amongst our parents, just through transparency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Waahida. And Harry.
Yeah, of course. I couldn't explain it better myself, so I'm going to go in another direction with it. I think we are required as a program to create these safe spaces for our students because of the trauma that they come and bring. And so for our parents, for our students, for our communities, we have to create a space that's responsive to their trauma. We have to create a space that's that listens to them, that brings these ideas of the things that they need and provide them to them so we can really level the playing field. But as someone who works with the alumni, something I see that's a big issue is how do we create that transitional space? Because we know, especially at a school, at some point our students are going to graduate, or in any program, at some point we need to let new people in and graduate our people that have been with us for a long time. And so the question is, they're going into a world that is almost the opposite of what we're creating. They're going into a world that sometimes unintentionally, but sometimes very intentionally is using their situation of poverty against them. So what do we do when our students go to a school where teachers listen and care about them and suddenly are going to university where teachers are, in Mexico at least, sometimes very corrupt, very disinterested in what's going on in their lives and why maybe they weren't able to complete the assignment that day. And students have a real struggle in Christel House, Mexico with, well, at Christel House, if I had a problem, I could say something. And now in my new school, I have a problem and they get mad at me for saying anything. So where do we create that space? Because if we loosen the reins and take away that safe space before they leave so they get an idea of what it's like, then we're not really doing our jobs. And yet we need to get these students ready for what comes next in our lives and these future challenges they're going to face in a real way, not just theoretically talking about what university is like, but really feeling what university is like. So how do we transition our students from a trauma-informed, trauma-responsive program like ours to a place that's going to use that against them in a lot of cases? And I think that's something that leaders have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Waahida and Sitara. I also want to thank our guests who are on this webinar, who are also providing their insightful thoughts in the chat. So this is a space for learning. And the beauty of our webinar today is that we are from different spaces. We're from sitting on different continents, but the context generally remains the same. And as our panelists are sharing the challenges, I also want to thank them for helping to provide solutions as well. And also some things, provocative thoughts, some things to think about in providing this type of challenge. We would have heard that the challenges of our students are the challenges of our leaders. That would have come out for us. We'd have heard solutions to this in terms of if trust is an issue, then build transparency. That can come out. Then also when we create such a wonderful environment for our students, as shared by Harry, how do we prepare them for the next phase of their life when certain realities are back to them, back in their space? So I'm hearing building on self-efficacy is something that comes out right here. Thank you all for our responses to question 1. As we move into our second question, it's a 2-part question for number 2. And for part A, I'm going to be asking Afua to share with us. And the question is, what leadership approaches and practices have proven most effective in navigating these challenges? So Afua.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, so to set the context for our schools, we're in Northern Ghana, as I mentioned, and the profile or the demographic of our students, these are all public schools, so government schools, all the teachers, school leaders are government employees. And in Ghana, we have a free basic education policy, and so parents are not really incentivized to contribute because it's the government's responsibility. Because of a new policy that was introduced a couple of years ago. And so these school leaders are in contexts where they're usually low resources, but then they have the extra burden of meeting the needs of the school, helping the school run effectively just on those limited resources. And so the leaders that we work with, what has proven most effective for them is firstly to do a needs assessment, right? There are a variety of needs that are facing you as a school leader in this context. So prioritizing those needs, which are the most important and which ones should be addressed before the others. Now, you can't only rely on the resources available to you also, so there needs to be strong collaboration and partnerships with both the local community you are working in, government agencies, non-governmental agencies, to help you address the challenges you are facing. And so in some of our schools, the results of some of these collaborations have been communities coming together to provide housing, for instance, for teachers who have to commute long distances to come to school. Others have been able to go into partnerships which have provided feeding for children in school, so they don't have to go home during the breaks, and then that takes away from contact hours. Another of the challenges we face is school attendance for pupils, right? Consistent attendance, because most of these communities are farming communities, and the children sometimes help their parents in the farms. And so there has to be a lot of parental sensitization and education to hammer or drive home the importance of having children come to school consistently so that there's no lost learning and there's progress in learning. And you can imagine as a school leader working in such a situation, it can be hard to build a sense of pride, a sense of belonging in your school context, right? But we find that those who are really effective are those who can leverage whatever means are available to them to really build a school culture so that they can celebrate teachers, even through small gestures. They can recognize performance. They can encourage and build the morale of their teachers so that they are contributing holistically to improving student learning. And so these are a few of the ways that we found that school leaders who are effective in our context are using. Thank you.
Thank you, Afua. And I'm sure as Afua shared, and we heard these challenges, we're thinking within our context, are we facing these? Is attendance something that affects us in our own context because of poverty? Is the interest from parents and support something that we face in our own context? Thank you also, Afua, for providing some of the suggestions for ways in which you have been combating these challenges. I would have noted, you would have said prioritizing what's important to you and also sharing, getting partnerships going with government and also non-government agencies in order for this mission that we're all on, because it is a mission, that this mission that we're all on can continue. The second part to our question, I'm going to be handing over to Ronald to share with us, and it is, can you share an example of a successful leadership intervention that has positively addressed challenges in your context?
Jason, where to start? There's so many examples, but you're now forcing me into a particular example. Allow me to just follow up on Harry. Harry speaks about the trauma the children go through, and which is the reality of our environment. You have children who, in some cases, and we've done a little bit of a survey among our students, particularly in the high school, and you'll be surprised how many of these trauma incidences our children have in their lives. So that's the environment in which we teach, and which we have to keep our teachers motivated. And behind you is a little bit of is a word there, school culture. So I believe that the foundation of effective school leadership lies in shaping and sustaining a strong, positive school culture. So I want to talk about that, because what we've done in our school, particularly in the high school, was to introduce a concept. Yes, many of these programs and things that we have, but we call it the LPP, it's a legitimate peripheral participation. In this environment, you learn to read a lot, to take things all over the show. And we've introduced this program, and we've seen how a little bit of knowledge where teachers are trained in the concepts of neuroscience, how to activate certain brain chemistries to make a child who is probably deemed not to be learn able or cannot be teach able. For instance, for that child with so many trauma-induced incidences in his life, how you can actually switch him on. And this is the type of training and aspects that we get involved in. Something I've never seen in all my 37 years in this industry. I've never seen it come through as it does here at Christel House. So we see on the ground, you see teachers now speaking about dopamine, how they actively switch on the dopamine, the serotonins, and all those good feelings within the child. I mean, this is probably a discussion on its own, but we train our teachers, and we actively start the day every morning where the teachers are modeling how they can be switched on in a simple AM brief, and then those teachers go into the class and they know it's about a happy and a positive environment. It's about achievement, the things that switches the child on, and managing that is the beauty that I experience, because that, if you can turn that into a school culture, then it becomes a positive environment of growth. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ronald. Golden nuggets right there. So if I'm to just paraphrase you with the switching on, we're talking about switching on your teachers, getting them into the frame of mind that all these children can, and then equipping them to now switch that on. I use the good word there, the dopamine, getting them to feel good about themselves. And then ultimately we'll have a positive school culture, because that is what you're building. Thank you so much, Ronald, for that. I also want to thank our guests as you continue to share and make it rich comments in our comment section. The learning for everyone. As we listen to our panelists, we also read the comments as we move them along, because I notice we're tackling each point as our panelists share and just giving your thoughts. So I want to thank you for that and encourage that we continue to do that throughout. Our third question, and I'll be asking Sitara and Ronald to speak on this, is how does your cultural context shape your approach to dealing with challenges associated with poverty? And do you leverage your experiences and knowledge gained from your global network to help you navigate these challenges? So Sitara, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm going to answer the second part first, which is we definitely do leverage our global network. And I think we're very lucky to be part of a network of schools. And there's a lot of value because, for example, all the departments like the academic heads, the HR people, all of them meet on a monthly basis. We're able to share problems of practice with each other. We're able to share best practices and learn from each other. Having said that, while we do have a global network and they do a lot of skill building as well, each country has a very unique context. And I think that's something that Christel House recognizes also. If I speak about India, within India, our two schools itself are really diverse and they both need different support. So some of the ways we address the challenges that are unique to our country, which also could be there in others, is, for example, in India, parental literacy rates are really low, so they themselves might not have the basic education and basic needs that they need. So what we do is we have a lot of parent counseling programs. So we teach them about positive parenting, family planning, even basics such as health and hygiene, because that's something that students from our background require from their parents. Another thing that we do is have financial literacy programs so that our parents can also kind of help the children get out of this along with us as partners. Another big issue I would say in our country is the lack of importance given to girl children, like getting educated. So we have an excellent program where we start working with parents as partners to figure out the life path of our students. So what kind of degree are they going to take? What is their long-term career? So that is another example of something that we do. Similarly, with teachers, we look at the needs of all the schools and do very specific skill building that is required, because again, both the schools have very different levels of teachers. And I'll allow Ronald to share a couple of more examples.
Thank you, Sitara. Go ahead, Ronald. Think you're muted. Yeah. Okay. Right.
I'm unmuted now. And I just want to say, you know, as Sitara spoke now, I can't but look at Waahida and recognize that Waahida knows the South African context. Wow, probably one of the most diverse and culturally diverse countries that I at least know of. We coming from a school environment where we have so many cultures in our school. If I take the two big cultures, for instance, you know, we've got a typical concept within our country. Ubuntu, we all know about, you must have heard of Ubuntu. Ubuntu means I am because we are. So this influences what happens within our day-to-day activity in a big way. You know, Ubuntu emphasizes interdependence and the beauty of coexistence within a community, fostering almost a deep sense of connection and collective responsibility. Now, if you listen to that, that's almost the opposite of what we sometimes want to achieve with education, isn't it? We talk about self-reliance, autonomy, and independence. So we do have cultural aspects that we have to almost be aware of on a regular basis as we work with our children, and particularly also our teachers for that matter. So there's a lot of sensitivity that we need to apply. So to balance this, we instill a sense. So we consciously go out to instill a sense of agency, self-efficacy among our children, because whereas, you know, everybody expects it, it's what you expect. If you're here in education, that is what it's about. But where you almost have to train and retrain and break it down. I mean, we are currently busy with a process of going all the way down to the bottom to see what does agency should it look like on the various levels. It's concepts that we don't normally deal with in education, and try to map it out all the way to when the students matriculate, for that matter. So if I go to on an international level, for instance, as Sitara did, you know, leveraging this global network that we are part of. Our global network is, every time I walk away from this global network, conversations and these, you know, I sometimes just sit and I wonder, wow, gold, it's like discovering gold. Sometimes you are so engrossed and so tied up with the activity that you deal with on a day-to-day basis that you can't see the innovative things taking place somewhere else unless you just listen, and you open yourself up to what other people do, but particularly, so the further they are from you, the more refreshing the ideas becomes. We introduced the concept of a US concept of MTSS, multi-tiered support systems, which comes from the US. But I tell you, when I saw this and I looked at our school, I looked at our problems and the things that we would like to achieve, I felt like I struck gold. And this is, I think, a lesson for us, all of us. Allow yourself to be open to learn from people who are the furthest away from you in terms of your culture, and you will see how it refreshes your uptake on your current issues in your school. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ronald and Sitara. And I think what's colorful about their response is that both India and South Africa has such a diverse culture. So the context within which both our panelists spoke would have been so much helpful to us. Just some things that would have jumped out to us, as Sitara would have shared. Maybe it doesn't exist in all our contexts, but it does. And when it does, it rears itself, and that is gender equity. That's something that we definitely will look at. Could you quickly just share with us that word that says, I am because we are? What's the
I think it's called Ubuntu.
So, okay, I'm unmuted now. Yes.
Yes.
So the concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are.
Okay.
And there's
Wanted to get that word in. Yes. Thank you so much.
Independence.
Thank you. All right. We move to our fourth question. Oh, let me just quickly say for our guests who are posting questions in the chat, the questions will be addressed in our Q&A section. So continue to post and we'll be addressing each. Question 4, going to be inviting Waahida, Afua, and Harry to chime in on this. And it says, how can school leaders effectively engage teachers, parents, and communities to overcome challenges in high poverty contexts and collectively work towards students' success? Start with you, Waahida.
Thanks, Jason. So I'm going to speak about working with parents for this particular question. One of the things that we have been making progress on is working with parents in order to develop them as parent leaders. So for example, in our first year, this is our 11th year. So in our first year of operation, we had parent-teacher conferences. So each parent gets 15 to 20 minutes to speak with the teacher about their child's progress. And it's an opportunity for the teacher to ask questions. And so, for the parent to ask questions of the teachers. And so one of the things that our teachers brought to my attention is that during the parent-teacher conferences, when the teacher asked the parent if they had any questions, all of the parents said no. So even when a student was performing poorly, parents still did not have a question to pose. And so one of the things we realized is that parents were a bit intimidated to ask questions or to challenge teachers, or to ask for extra support because they felt that, you're the teacher, you're the expert, what do I know? And so one of the things that we did is we spent some time with parents who we felt were really respected amongst the other parents, and we trained them to be trainers. And essentially, we trained them to teach parents how to ask questions and how to advocate for their children during parent-teacher conferences and just at other times throughout the school year. So we had a parent meeting. We divided the parents into small groups, and each group was led by another parent. So essentially, they worked together, and they ended up coming up with a list of questions that parents can ask, that they can kind of choose from. And that really helped to, give our parents confidence to engage with teachers. And so during our parent-teacher conference, we actually have a section where you have to ask a question. And so if a parent doesn't have a question, we actually have a list of questions that they can actually choose from. And we found that to be really effective. And now parents feel very empowered. So now we don't really have the problem that we used to have. Instead of parents not having any questions, they have a laundry list of questions, which is awesome, to ask teachers. And, also just pushing them to hold teachers accountable as well. And letting them know that you're the expert on your child. It doesn't matter if you have a master's degree or if you finished 6th grade, You're always going to be the expert on your child. And we want you to ask questions. We want you to offer us feedback. And so that's something that we've really made a lot of progress on. And I think the reason why it was effective is that it was led by other parents and it didn't come from the administration, which can feel very top down. So that's something that I'm really proud of. And it's an area that we've really made progress in.
Thank you for that, Waahida.
Thanks, Jason.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So for our context, school leaders have said you first have to build trust, right? You have to lead with empathy. You have to be a role model to both your teachers and the community. And this allows you to really engage them and move forward in the interest of the school. When it comes to strategies for engaging teachers, I think the key thing is having an interest in their professional development. And so with our support to these schools, we train the school leaders so that they are able to sit in class, observe the teachers' lessons, and provide feedback and coaching to them afterwards. And so once you do this, and then you are going around observing what's happening, you're able to cut teachers who are doing great work, and you're able to recognize and celebrate them, whether it's in your staff meetings or in your general meetings with parents and the communities. When it comes to attendance, which is a key issue, as I've said, for our context, school leaders usually hold parent sensitization and engagement meetings. And again, this is where trust comes in, right? And little things such as rewards. So rewards for high attendance, so that we are encouraging those who are setting the example to keep going and providing an incentive for those who are yet to reach that milestone. And this goes both for teachers and for students, right? Because you can have a student attendance problem or you can have a teacher attendance problem depending on the community and its factors as well. And so at the program level, where we are supporting all these 85 schools, we have instituted as Rising an awards program where every year we have a criteria and we are awarding schools, we are awarding school leaders, we are awarding teachers who are performing really well. And we encourage the school leaders to do same at the school level, right? It doesn't have to be something grandiose or big, but just little acknowledgements to teachers will go a long way. And when it comes to the parents' engagements, we found that the use of data, really using data on student learning and attendance, and then making that data understandable, because you are looking at a context where a lot of the parents themselves have low literacy levels. So breaking down the data for them to understand. When you say 40% and you're talking about days, you break it down, you're saying your child is coming to school 2 out of the 5 days, right? And that really impacts learning, and showing them progress over time to see, okay, at the beginning of the year, this is where we were, this is how far the progress we've made. How can we collectively come together to build a plan and hold ourselves accountable to that plan so that we are tracking on how we are progressing towards addressing these challenges? And these are some of the ways we found to be very effective in engaging parents and teachers to really address the issues that face our schools.
Thank you, Afua. Harry.
Yeah, I feel like this brings together so many questions. I think about the cultural context that we talked about a little bit ago, and it can be something that we have to focus on and pay attention to, but it's also a huge strength for each of our countries, each of our cultures. I think of Mexico and Mexico City specifically, where as Latinos, like such a community building culture, like that's something that's built into us. So we have this advantage of students wanting to be engaged, parents wanting to be engaged, feeling like it's not enough that we receive something from Christel House. We want to be a part of that. So I think, here in Mexico, I think that that's a context that really helps us to work with our engagement and build our communities. And I think kind of the main piece that's most important to think about when you're building strategies that are effective for your context in your country is that the support needs to feel mutual for the communities that are participating. I think that's what's so strong about Waahida's program that she just spoke about, because having the parents build the questions and participating is a way that they feel like they're mutually invested in this, that it's not just the school giving something to them, like a top-down approach, but their contributions being really valued. And I really like that part of Afua that Afua mentioned of the data being an important part, because now we're seeing them on a peer-to-peer basis. And I think when we create these kinds of community supports that that allow parents and allow students and allow communities to think of themselves on the same level as the program, which they are, I think is a really effective way of doing it. So in the future, when you get to this alumni program, that's something that I think we've been able to build here and has been effective, that our alumni come in and say, oh, I want to help with this. Oh, I want to do this for our students now. We create group chats that involve alumni that are already at a school with our newest students that are entering into that school, so that they can all have their own little community. And our oldest alumni can feel like they are now providing the same support that teachers and leaders are providing. And I think when our parents and alumni and community members feel that sense of they're providing something as real as what the teachers are providing, is when they're engaged and they're participating that way. So I think that's the question to ask at every point of that community engagement is, does this feel like something that's based on mutual respect and mutual support, you know?
Thank you so much, Harry. So as we are moving through our questions to ensure we have time for the Q&As, I know our three speakers would have been on the same line, and what jumps out to us is equality, equity, allowing stakeholders to feel that they are on the same level as who is providing, and also the programs being provided. Thank you so much. So we move to our fifth question. We have broken into two parts. The first part, I would love to hear, Harry would just continue, then followed by Sitara and Ronald will chime in, is, as a leader, despite the challenges, what is most rewarding about working in this context?
I think as a leader, I mean, we're working on all this high level thing that's really easy to get, as we say, lost in the sauce. And I think something that really always brings me back and always makes it worth it are the individual stories. I mean, that's, I think, why we all do what we do. So I'll be so stressed and writing a report and getting something together and trying to make a big change, and then an alumni will burst in my door and sit down and say like, oh, are you having lunch? I want to go have lunch. Come on, I'm hungry. Let's go, and kind of rush me out of my office to sit down and to talk about their lives. And that's like, it's so fun and so exciting. I said I have the best job. It's the best job. I get to hang out with these alumni and hear about their stories, and even the frustrating parts that they're overcoming. It's exciting, them coming with homework that I don't understand anymore because they've gotten to a level that I can't even dream to achieve at this point. All these moments, these really individual moments, are where I feel like it's all become really worth it. So as leaders, take a little time out and get those interactions, because that one-on-one, you really realize the impact that all this big work has on each individual.
Thank you, Harry. Sitara?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Harry said. I think even just walking into the school, seeing all those amazing bright faces, is something which gives a lot of energy. Adding to that is knowing the fact that you're playing, even if it's a tiny part, that you are playing a part in changing people's lives, which in turn changes community and the world, right? So that gives a lot of motivation. And I would say, thirdly, for me, it's the fact that you learn and grow so much. Like, you build so much empathy, you build so much resilience, you understand what a bubble you have lived in, you understand that you have so much more that you can give people. And that is also something, I think, which just makes me continue doing the work. Yeah.
Thank you, Sitara. Ronald?
Yeah, for me, it is about these two groups, you know, the students and the teachers. If I look at the students, exactly as Harry and Sitara said now, you know, it's a proud moment when you can speak to a medical doctor who comes from Christel House, South Africa. It's a proud moment when you speak to dentists and engineers, you know, they come and if it was not for for the school, they would, you know, for the fact they would not have made it. You see, that makes this so real and the work we do so powerful. But if I bring it a little bit closer to our teachers, you know, a few days ago, we started the new year now, and we doubled up. We're busy doubling the school, so we brought in double the number of grade 8s from outside Christel House. So for the first time, we brought in new teachers, 4 of them, and we had to retrain them. But you know, the beauty of it is when you realize in your encounter with these new teachers, and you tell them and you talk to them about Teach Like a Champion, 49 skills of Teach Like a Champion, and you go through them and you say to them, all of them, you have to adapt and you have to adjust, because they don't work exactly like that in a trauma-informed school. Because in a trauma-informed school, it comes with a little bit of a difference, because we must always remember who we work with. And, you know, once they get it and they say, now they understand, then you wish that you could just, and this is what I hope we're doing here, shout it out to the world and say, come, let me show you what can be done with a simple, just thoughtful way in which you don't just implement, but you look at it within the context, and training teachers in it and seeing how they get it right is so rewarding. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ronald. Thank you, Sitara and Harry. So we would have heard from our three panelists as it was what's rewarding about the work. And we're going to be closing off this section of it by hearing from Afua and Waahida, who will give us lessons or advice to share for new school leaders who are working in this context. So Afua, start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. And since I'm not directly in the school environment, I thought I wouldn't do justice to this. So I asked our school leaders, and I have two quotes from two of them that I want to share. Yes. So the first one goes, my advice for new leaders entering high poverty context is to prioritize deep listening to understand the community's unique needs, aspirations, and challenges. Cultivate relationships built on trust and mutual respect. Celebrate small victories to sustain morale and momentum. Continuously evaluate your own leadership. Actively seek feedback and adapt your approach as needed. By embracing these principles, you can effectively navigate the complexities of working in such a context. The second one is be an active part of a community, because schools don't exist in isolation and your impact extends beyond the classroom. Respect community values, even when they differ from your perspective, as mutual understanding fosters long-term cooperation. Lead with empathy and action, because people will follow a leader who listens, supports, and is willing to go the extra mile. Education is more than just teaching. It's about transforming lives. And as head teachers or school leaders, we have the privilege of shaping the future, one student, one teacher, and one community at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Afua and Waahida.
Thanks, Afua. Thanks, Jason. So I have two things. One is to ensure that you prioritize your mental health. A lot of trauma is transferred to us as leaders who work in these in high poverty contexts. So I encourage everyone to, find a therapist, just have them on speed dial, a counselor, a minister, but have someone, that can support you, on this leadership journey. So that's something that's been really important. And also, just to avoid burnout. I've suffered from burnout, over the past 11 years several times. And the reason why I get burned out is because I love the work that I do, as we all do. And so, it's nothing for me to stay up to 12 o'clock doing work, and I like doing it. But just because we like doing it doesn't mean that we should do it. Sometimes we have to close the laptop and just take care of ourselves. And so that's one of the big lessons that I've learned and that I'm incorporating in my journey this year. I just came back from sabbatical last year. Another thing that is important is just to be honest with yourself and with your families, that transcending poverty is hard. Like, it's really hard. And, it's not fair, but if you come from an impoverished setting, you got to work harder. And so we have to just really be honest. There was a situation where we had a student who came to school. She was an older student, I believe she was in 8th grade, and she was tired. She shared that she had to stay up late last night, helping her mom with her younger sibling. And so the teacher wanted to let her sleep, in class that day. And I said, let's have her put her head down, during breakfast. But to be honest with you, she's going to find herself in the same situation as her mom if she sleeps in class. So it's one of those situations where it's a fine line, right? You want to make sure that you're taking care of your students, but you also want to push them to know that if they want to have a better tomorrow, that they have to work. and that we're here to support them, but they have to do the hard work. So that's something that I've learned, and that I've learned to just tell parents, and it's not something to be down about. It's something to be excited about, because they're on the right path, but we just have to be honest with them that this is not easy. And transcending from poverty to middle class is the hardest leap that you'll ever take. And so we just need to be honest with them about what it's going to take, for us, all of us, children, parent, school leaders, to help our parents dig their way out of poverty, that we got to dig, we got to work.
Thank you, Waahida.
Thank you.
And thank you to all our panelists who would have brought us so efficiently through these questions. I know based on our comments that persons are in total agreement with some of what we would have shared, and also would have used some of what you shared from your specific context as learning moments, things to apply. So I'm also very happy that we would have ended this section by giving nuggets to new leaders within such a context. One, about the benefits of it ultimately, and also what are things that they would need to do, and the mindset, that's very important, the mindset that you take into this type of job, dealing with this particular group of persons to whom we serve. So we're now over to the Q&A, and I want to thank everyone who would have submitted questions thus far. Members of our team would have been answering some of these questions. So what we're going to be doing is taking a few of these questions, and I will just call upon some of our different persons on our panel to answer these questions. So our team was monitoring the Q&A section, so they're now going to be giving us some of the questions you had, and then we'll pass it on to our panelists. So question 2, we have a question from Toshia. All right, let me just read this question. It says, in relation to the poll, to what extent is a lack of family members who have pursued education a barrier? The lack of knowledge on how to navigate applications, get funding, and have help along the way. I'm going to call on Sitara if you want to take this one on.
Sure, I think Harry as well, you can add a lot. I think it does play a big role, but it's not something which needs to be a barrier if we work with our parents, and also if we have other agencies supporting them. I think the main aspect is, while we might not be able to change the context of our parents, what we can do is show them that what they are able to contribute towards is just the motivation that they can give the students, the belief that they show the students, the positive environment that they can create at home. So it does not matter if you're not literate, it does not matter if you do not have enough finances, but these are things that you can do, and probably work with the parents on that. So I think that's something that we could do.
Thank you, Sitara. I'm going to backtrack to a question. I hope that would have answered it for you, Dashia. Ronald?
Could I jump in on that question too, please?
Sure, Harry, sure.
Yeah. I work with all the higher education stuff here in Christel House, Mexico, so I think I have some perspective there. I think there's kind of a 2-point solution to that. On one side, there's kind of the triage solution, which is, as I mentioned before, our students deserve the same support for a university that our wealthy students are receiving from their parents. So sometimes I feel like I'm kind of that little tiny aspect of the parent, in that I'm the person who knows what you're supposed to do. I'm the person who knows how to write a good essay. I'm the person who has all this information. And I'm going to come one-on-one to make sure, and my team is going to come one-on-one to make sure that everyone is receiving the very specific support and those very specific cultural elements that they need to know, that their parents might not know about, college application processes and being in college. But at the same time, we need to be helping parents from the beginning to have these skills and this knowledge that they need. So we do like School for Parents here at Christel House. And a big part of that from first grade is about how are you going to be supporting your kid when they go off to college, because that's the plan. What are the realities of your student being in college? And when we get to high school, it's about how are you saving money for college? How much money do you need to save up? I mean, really digging into the specifics so that the parents, by the time their students are graduating, are experts on various aspects. Maybe they can't help their student with their, vector homework, but they can understand the reality of being a college student. So it's creating an environment that provides that for students and building with the parents, because without the parent support, there's not much the students can do to get through.
Thank you, Harry. Well, as we pass the questions around, Ronald, just quickly to this question that was posed to us. At what point have you, as experts, observed that children at Christel House begin to embrace the nurturing environment and demonstrate the mental and emotional growth you strive to foster, considering their unique dynamics?
Yes. And I can tell you, it's important to be aware of where you are. We're talking in terms of the environment where our kids come from. We know they come from an environment where, in some cases, they do not know better, is what we sometimes hear. And you mentioned the book Teaching with Poverty in Mind. Eric Jensen has a little keyboard where he says sometimes the child, is off key, so to speak. He gives a response, and that response is not necessarily the response that is within my domain as an educator. So there's lots of understanding that needs to take place, and their cues is not always your cues. But when we start, so you almost have to give them a language. And this is why Christel House spends lots of time on speaking to concepts like gratitude, and we actually teach values. So once you've given the language, and with time you realize they can also now start expressing themselves. And through the years, you can actually, so we do what we call culture surveys within the school. So it's not just left on its own. We actually measure, and we're always busy looking for the best tool. But at any given time, there is a tool that we check what is you almost do a dipstick within the school. And yeah, it can be addressed. And but the most important part is they need the language, which they don't have. And once you've given them the language, which is the knowledge, I call it the KAP, a CAP, which is give them the knowledge, then you check the attitudes, and then you look out for the practices. And when you measure that, you get a sense of where they are and how appreciative they are of what they receive.
Thank you so much, Ronald. Waahida, I'll pose this question to you. I am an aspiring leader, particularly for an underserved population. What can parents, teachers, policymakers, and communities undertake to support me for a seamless experience? In other words, what have you got the stakeholders do for you to achieve success?
Thanks, Jason. So that's an area of growth for us. I think that we have made some traction in terms of stakeholder engagement. But if I'm being honest, I think that we have a long way to go. So I think that somebody else might be better suited to answer that question. But one of the things that I will say is just making sure that we're actively engaging with our community. I think that those are some of the things that we need to do more. So for example, when there are community meetings that are not necessarily related to education, one of the things that we want to do more of is joining those meetings so that we don't appear to be isolationist. I think that was never our intention to be isolationist in terms of engaging with the community, but I think that we have not engaged enough in meetings with community members that are not necessarily related to our scope of work. So that's one of the areas that I'm hoping to make progress on this year.
Thank you, Waahida.
Thank you.
Afua, did you want to chime in on that and just give us your perspective?
Sure. No, I agree completely with Waahida. You can't overemphasize the importance of community engagement. And in our program, we always have to draw the line, like how much more engagement, how much less, because you think you focused on engagement last term, so this term, let's turn our attention to something else. And then it just comes back all the time. It's like, it has to be ongoing, continuous. And so in order also not to put so much stress on our resources, we try to leverage on partnerships, right? So we realize there are other organizations working in the same communities we are working in. It's not necessarily we organizing the community engagements, but how can we join in those meetings like Waahida was saying, so that it's not you doing the heavy lifting all the time. So I would say you need to get out there, you need to network, you need to make yourself known, you need to see what partnerships, you need to see what experiences you can leverage on, who you can learn from. There may be people in your context who have done similar things. Try and get in touch with them, try and learn from their experiences, try and get to know the policymakers, someone who can connect you to someone who can just maybe give a listening ear, hear what you're planning out, give you advice on who to approach. Even that alone is a key first step. And then you take it from there.
Thank you, Afua. I'm going to put this question now to one of our Christel House leaders now. What kind, any of you can just chime in at that point. What kind of challenges have you faced from stakeholders to break the cultural barriers in the process of developing Christel House? So Ronald, as we're thinking about it, Sitara, Harry can just chime in. What are some of those challenges you have faced from stakeholders to break this cultural barrier in the process of developing Christel House in your country context?
Yeah, look, I can tell you when the school started, there was lots of distrust because we have this free school, and people take anything that you come up with free and with a pinch of salt. They don't trust you immediately. So the stories in our corridors is that the original teachers at the school, I've only started 3 years afterwards, but the original teachers struggled to make inroads. So they had to almost take waivers and willing to come and take the chance with us. But South Africa has we know how things work. We've got barriers, for instance, in terms of taking our school buses into certain areas because we've got taxi violence and we've got taxis groupings, and they will not allow you in the area with a strange vehicle to come and pick up students, and take to the school. So there's lots of negotiation taking place. So the people who work within the school, they know the environment. We know how to deal with the community leaders. We do not walk on our own. And we even go so far as to have our parents, on committees. And they are the most important people in making inroads for us where barriers within the communities flare up. To the point where, Sitara mentioned earlier that these are gang-infested communities where our kids come from. It's dire situation, and there's always a person who wants to make a buck out of somebody who looks weak. So we have, and sometimes these community leaders are part of it, So we have been extremely cautious in going into those communities, but particularly taking our parents with us. And they are the strength. They want their children to be part of the school. They will open the way for us to be part of a community.
Thank you, Ronald. And in our context, as I am the principal here at Christel House, Jamaica, so you would have heard from a South Africa perspective, and it is exactly the same with us. For us, we refer to these parents as the gatekeepers because they are the ones who allow us to become a part of the community. Christel House, Jamaica is in year 5 of existence. So we would know a lot of these challenges that we would have faced early on to get this concept, because the Christel House model in its entirety is new to the country. There are models that are similar, but the entire concept of what a Christel House does is new to the community. And trust, that was a word that Waahida kept stressing earlier when it comes to parents. trust was something that we had to build in order to get us to where we are. And then when we put the aspect of equality, equity, importance between the providers, which is Christel House, and those who we're providing for, which is the parents, we find that there is no buy-in to what we are providing, and then the support grows, the interest grows, the attendance improves, the children's performance increase, and we are very thankful for that. I want to just express a big thank you to our panelists for sharing during this section of our webinar, and just to see if there are any other questions out there as we are about to go into bringing back our poll results that we would have posted at the beginning, and then we head into our closing. But just to see if there is any one question we could take right before we finish. There's a question that says, how do you recruit students from the many poor in need, considering your model of offering free education? I'm going to open that to our panelists who wants to take that one on.
Hi, Jason.
Yes,
I can
go ahead,
take that.
Waahida. Yes.
Jason, I can take that. I think
Sure.
one of the things that we've learned over the years is that for the most part, we can serve any child. We currently don't have the capacity to serve students that have severe barriers to learning, but for the most part, we can take all students. One of the things we realize is that we can't necessarily take all parents. And so in the beginning, we had an open door policy. It was just first come, first serve. There was not really any criteria to get into the school. Based on, a lot of challenges that we've had over the years, we've realized that that was not quite working. And so what we wanted instead were parents who really believed in our mission and who were ready to get to work. Because we don't believe that we can do it without parents. I know that there are some organizations that think that, they can do it without parents. We don't believe that because we haven't had any evidence that that works. What works is a parent who believes in our mission and is willing to, pull up their sleeves in order to get to work. And so what we do now is we actually interview the parents. We don't want to see the students. We actually tell them, leave the student at home, because we realize it doesn't really matter with the students, but it does matter with the parents. So when we're interviewing the parents, we're not looking for them to be the most articulate. We're not looking for them to be the most educated, but what we're looking for is parents who know what our mission is and who believe in it. Because in the past, we were accepting students and they didn't even know what our mission was. They were just looking for a school, and so at our school, we require, parents and families to also get to work, and we need them to chip in. They don't need to understand the homework necessarily, but they need to make sure that it's done and that the student has tried to do it, or they need to cause it to happen. And so now we interview parents, and we also ask them to get a recommendation from a community member. And the recommendation needs to outline that this parent is willing to do whatever it takes in order to ensure that their child succeeds. Because unfortunately, everybody is not willing to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, transcending from poverty is hard. And so we need parents who have bought into that. And since we've changed our process, we've had so much more success. And the socioeconomic status of our students has remained the same. And so we are not getting, the least impoverished people in Alex. Most of our parents make about $200 US a month, which has been a constant. And so that's one of the things that's really made a big impact, is being selective about the parents and just making sure that you're doing it in a way that doesn't discriminate, that doesn't disadvantage parents because they can't speak well, or that they're not educated. We're not looking for that. I'm actually not the one that even interviews the parents. We make sure that they're being interviewed in the language that they feel comfortable in, and that, they're just willing to do the work. So the interview process is just about 15, 20 minutes. And the parent just needs to know what the mission is, and they need to know, what we expect from parents. And of course, we tell them how to prepare for that interview as well. So again, making sure it's transparent, it's not a secret, what we're expecting. We share that with parents and, then we ask them questions about that.
Thank you so much, Waahida. And if we visit the chat too, we'll see where some of our guests would have been sharing similar expressions that you would have shared, Waahida, in relation to that. Going back to our poll that was posted at the beginning. Now, we would have asked some thought-provoking questions about challenges and priorities in high poverty schools. Now, if we are going to now reflect on this, so it's posted there. And we can quickly see what our audience, I'm hoping that the vast majority of those who would have come on at some point would have at least had a chance just to see what our questions were that we posted. And these are the results that have been shared with us. But I want to ask this question though, just by a show of hands. After hearing from our panelists, the various thoughts of our panelists within this context, in their own context, right across the world when we look at where our panelists reside, how many of us at this point in time would have changed our initial answers based off what the discussion would have brought us? How many of us would change our opinions based on what we'd have heard? So you can indicate that just a show of hands, or is it that we would have been further encouraged by what we would have heard from our panelists? The beauty of what we shared is that many concepts were reiterated as we spoke. Many of the challenges are very similar despite us being in different places, and the answers revolve around the concepts of equality, equity, resilience, how collaboration will assist us. Now, whether you are an educator, policymaker, or an advocate, I am certain what was shared by our panelists will be something that we can take, we really can take into our, not just our school lives, the lives of our students, the communities from which they reside, and also within our own lives. Because as Waahida made mention of burnout, burnout is real, especially when you're also serving a mission. But then there are times when these reminders come to in our space. As Harry would have given an example, when a student, a past student, alumni just visits, it makes it all worth it all over again. So that feel-good feeling that Ronald would have shared, that dopamine level, comes to you again and gets you back into the passion and the spirit of serving. I would have started our discussion earlier with a quote from Jensen in his book, Teaching with Poverty in Mind. And I also want us to walk away with a similar quote that would also sum up a lot of what our panelists would have shared. And Jensen states, student and school turnarounds are accomplished by fostering caring relationships that build students' resilience, self-esteem, self-efficacy, by setting high academic standards in the belief that all students can learn, and by initiating a focused and collaborative effort among our staff members, parents, and the community to engage and challenge students irrespective of their economic realities. So we know that we are operating within the context of poverty, but we leave with the belief that we can, and we leave with the experiences of our global colleagues that it does actually happen, but it takes that much effort. As we close off, can I just, if there are any thoughts, closing thoughts, any of our panelists want to give as we walk away, I would appreciate that at this time. Ronald, you were just going to go ahead.
Well, I always have something to say. I just wanted to say, I mean, when you spoke about teaching with poverty in mind, I thought what What a smart title for a book, Leading with Poverty in Mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. Any final words from anybody else on our panel?
I just wanted to thank everybody, and there's been so much of learning. There's been a lot of reinforcing what we believe as well, and a lot of new insights as well. So thank you so much, and thank you, Jason, for moderating this.
Thank you, Sitara.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of, and I would say for me, it's the rest of my morning. For some of you, it's the rest of your afternoon, and for some of you, have yourselves a wonderful night. Thank you. Take care, everyone.